Welcome back to the Builder's Bench. I'm Craig Larkins. Big news out of Victoria this week. The province has officially introduced prompt payment legislation. It's something the construction industry has been pushing for a long time, and it's finally here. Joining me on the bench to unpack what it all means is Chris Atchison, president of the BC Construction Association. Welcome back to the bench, Chris.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here as always, and under these circumstances, it's really special to be a guest on your show today.
It's a great news conversation. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of the bill, let's start with the why. Why has prompt payment been such a huge issue for the industry here in BC?
Yeah, it's prompt payment hasn't always been just an issue for British Columbia. It's not that long ago where this was a national issue. And, I remember one of my very first Canadian Construction Association events back in, I think it was 2018, where they were talking about their origin story. And the reason that the CCA came into existence was with a dispute over the federal government over prompt payment on federal projects. So they're well over 100 years old. And this was the genesis for the Canadian Construction Association. And since then, I think every regional, provincial association has had this discussion with their authorities at one time or another. And of course, we know that the Construction Act in Ontario came into fruition. They were first. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba all have variations of prompt payment legislation and lien reform. And so it was our turn, and we've been knocking on this door. This has been a priority advocacy issue for the BC Construction Association and our regional partners for the better part of a decade. For as long as I've been involved, our boards have been emphatic that this is the strategic priority for advocacy. And we've managed to reach a tremendous milestone as of yesterday with Bill 20 being introduced in the legislature, and Bill 20 is the Construction Prompt Payment Act. So we're thrilled to be able to get it to the start line. And once it receives approval and royal assent, we'll have a lot of work to do again in getting the regulations in line to provide the framework for how it's all going to work.
The name of the bill has a nice ring to it as well. It's nice hearing that. Just so we're clear for everyone listening, this week's announcement is the starting line. As the bill gets introduced, then it makes its way through debate, committee, and finally gets royal assent, and that's when it officially becomes law. So there is a process to the process, as with most government bills. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of the bill, Chris. For those who haven't had a chance to dig into it yet, can you walk us through the key parts of the bill?
So at the highest level, it will cover the following certainties. It'll offer requirements for regular invoicing. It'll also outline the requirements of what defines a proper invoice. It will establish timelines for the submission of those proper invoices, and it will provide notice for an invoice not meeting those proper requirements. So in other words, it establishes communication early. If I'm issuing you an invoice, I expect payment. If you don't want to pay me, you have an obligation to let me know within a certain timeline. And though that timeline happens to be 14 days. So if you don't want to pay me for something that you feel I haven't done, you'll still have that mechanism. But it will force conversation, and it will remove the ability for parties to just ignore each other, and not for us to be making assumptions in a vacuum. It will provide payment certainty between the owner and contractor, thus, and then between the contractor and subcontractors and their subs, and so on down the supply chain. It will involve everybody who is under contract, from the owner right down to the finishing trades, but it all gets initiated with that proper invoice. And in terms of adjudication, it also outlines in the legislation what matters can be adjudicated, how the selection of an adjudicator and the conduct of adjudication, how that is to be determined, what the enforcement of that determination of an adjudication will be, and then the acknowledgement that, if required, judicial review. So it's really quite high level, broad-based, but at the same time, it sets into motion this understanding about what's going to be coming and what's going to be fleshed out through the detailed regulation.
There's a lot of factors at play, and I just have to give the frequently asked questions resource hub on the BCCA website a shout out, because if you do have questions, it's all allowed in there, and there's a lot of great resources there. We'll touch on that a little later as well. I did want to ask, so we did have a VRCA member reach out in regards to public owners. Are they part of the mix? Are they affected by the bill?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're really happy that that question is being asked, because what the bill doesn't do is it doesn't address the issue of carve-outs, and we've been blunt right from the beginning, back into the days where we were doing our roundtable discussions and doing our cross-jurisdictional analysis, and learning from what's happening in Ontario and Alberta and provinces in between, is that their lessons have taught us
Mhm.
that carve outs are not a good thing to provide clarity and certainty across the industry. And if we saw one thing from the Alberta model, it's that they made an effort initially to exempt public sector owners. So we've been very vocal on this with the province that when it comes to developing the regulations, where the legislation falls silent on that right now, we will make sure that the regulation addresses that carve outs are not provided to the provincial government. Where we have to demonstrate some of the caution in messaging. So I want to be very clear. BCCA and our industry partners are saying zero
Mhm.
carve-outs. That will be our approach going into the regulatory period. Um, because the prompt payment or Bill 20 does not include significant reforms to the Lien Act, there are some entities that remain, I guess, unleanable. One of those examples might be somebody like a BC Hydro
Mhm.
or a project being built on Indigenous land. So there are some nuances that will need to be addressed in regulation. But I think it's also important to note that all owners, whether you're private or public, will be aware of prompt payment legislation and adjudication in British Columbia. And if you want contractors to be part of your projects, you need to start resembling what the rest of the industry is doing and how that culture is shifting towards one of payment
So
certainty.
we're early enough in the stages of this legislation to be having those conversations, and for you to come forth and say, no, that's not going to work. Okay.
Absolutely. Like I think I think it needs to be clear that um, throughout all of our consultation, dating back a number of years now, beyond just when we got this on the province's radar, but all of the work that we've done in behind the scenes in preparing documentation, reviewing legislation from other jurisdictions,
Mhm.
having discussions, pan industry discussions about what's working and what should be included. There's a lot of discussions that have taken place, and there's a lot of comments and comparisons that have already taken place that won't make it onto the legislators' drafting table. But they are being held in kind of that's where we will get to those level of detail in
Okay.
regulations.
And so once it's passed into law, how do you see this changing life on the ground for the people on the ground, the boots on the ground?
Yeah, it's a great question, Craig, and it's one that we still have. There's still some work that we have to do ahead. I keep mentioning the regulations that need to support this. I want the industry to be under no illusions that that once this law is passed, it won't change anything on the ground fundamentally yet.
Mhm.
But it will send a message to industry and government that now it's time to work on the regulations, and it's now time to flesh out this law with regulations that support it appropriately. And that will get into the details. So an adjudication authority would need to be set up. We would be involved in that. We wouldn't be the adjudication authority, but we would be involved in selecting it. We need to develop the regulations. We will develop those regulations alongside the government and our industry partners to make sure that we get the right balance. But we're talking months. We're not talking days from the legislation being passed that this will be a noticeable change to industry,
Mhm.
with one exception. And that one exception will be that the message should be received by industry that times are changing, that culture needs to change, that processes will need to change, and this should be factored in to the culture going forward of the industry, that owners GCs, large trade contractors, all in the continuum of construction, need to start making sure that they are prepared for when this becomes a reality for the ecosystem of construction in British
So
Columbia.
the message is sent loud and clear. The ball is rolling within the government, Chris. A lot of members are saying this sounds great. What do we do
Yep.
next? What should contractors be doing right now to get ready? Keep reading, keep paying attention to email alerts and such from BCCA.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. If you haven't checked out our industry priorities page on prompt payment, we've got our myths and realities document. We've got our frequently asked questions that will continue to receive questions from industry and update update those files as we go. We were only able to issue those after we could see the final version of the legislation yesterday,
Mhm.
but we're going to be offering webinars for the membership, webinars for industry to explain what this means, bring in construction lawyers and subject matter experts who have been immersed in this discussion, both with the province, to help outline what this means now and what this is going to mean and how things are going to align with other provinces. So there's lots of moving parts right now, but I have to say yesterday was tremendously significant for us to be able to say, okay, we've reached a milestone, and this milestone isn't going to change things overnight, but all at once it has changed things in terms of mentality
Mhm.
and progress, representing progress and pride for the industry. We have been heard, we have been seen, we matter. The government needs us to build critical infrastructure and housing for the province. Our members aren't going anywhere.
Mhm.
They're going to need to be represented, and this is a significant way that we can demonstrate how they've been represented and they've been seen and
And
heard.
there is obviously, like you mentioned, there's going to be a learning curve. That's why we're here. That's our role as associations. So we'll be
Absolutely.
following the conversation with you as it goes and as the bill makes its way through the Parliament here in Victoria. So a quick question for you: if you could leave one message for contractors, trades, the industry, suppliers listening after yesterday's announcement, what is that message right now?
Help is on the way. We've really, I can't say this enough, but thank you to all of the contractors who have been clear that this is a challenge, either publicly or privately. Your voice becomes our voice. Every single one of your members, Craig, has amplified their voice through the Vancouver Regional Construction Association, through your leadership and through Janine's leadership. That message has come loud and clear through your representatives to the BCCA board. And our combined boards have been true to this priority. They have been committed to make this a focal point of our advocacy, and that voice matters. So, to every one of your members who has suffered, who has endured, who has shared a story, I would say to them, thank you, because we wouldn't have done this if your livelihoods, your business wasn't at stake, but you told us it was, and we were able to do something about us. It took us far too long, but some of that was outside of our control,
Mhm.
but the message has been clear and consistent from the beginning.
And we are here now. So I do have one more question. It's more of a personal note. After all those years of advocacy, Chris, the meetings, what was it like walking up to the podium yesterday at the press conference and finally seeing prompt payment become a reality for you?
Yeah, I think for a long time, Craig, I think it was, I had imagined at some point that that would happen. So, I think there was somewhere in my brain, there was yeah, a familiarity that whether I was standing beside the Attorney General or standing beside the Premier, I fully expected that the day would come where myself or somebody from the BC Construction Association would be standing in a prominent role alongside announcing um, the the new legislation being announced. Um, but in the moment, I think it was a lot of pride. There were some board members that were able to attend, other industry partners who were there. It was a strange calm and just it, we had finally been heard. And I think to be able to achieve that, I have lots of questions about why it took so long, or but I still think that those reasons didn't matter in the moment. What mattered in the moment was we got to that point. We've arrived at that point. We've got plenty of work to do. But I appreciate that moment, and I will remember that moment for a very long
That is
time.
so great to hear, Chris. And of course, we'll keep following the story and update you as the legislation again moves through the legislature in Victoria. So thanks again for joining us, Chris. Chris Atchison is the president of the BC Construction Association. If you're looking for more information, BCCA, as I mentioned, has put together a great prompt payment resource hub available on their website. I'm Craig Larkins, and this is the Builder's Bench.